Hello and welcome to the latest video on my top 1000 countdown. So on this video, we are looking at numbers 250 down to 241. We are officially 3/4 of the way through my top 1000. So we have the final quarter to go, beginning with this video. Let me just guarantee someone will ring me if I don't silence it. There we are, people. So let us go to fighter number 250 now. And that fighter is Jack Twin Sullivan, brother to Mike Sullivan, the former welterweight champion. Jack Twin Sullivan beat two world champions. He fought 222 rounds against champions. And he beat two Hall of Fame fighters, fighting 194 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. Jack Twin Sullivan had 0 fights against rated fighters, being a pre-rated era fighter. He scored 23 knockouts, 4 knockouts in 3 rounds or less, and 0 knockouts in the first round. Jack Sullivan was top 10 rated for 0 years, and he had the longest unbeaten run that ran to 41 fights. He had a very large career. He was pound for pound rated for 0 years, and Jack Twin Sullivan had 17 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 2 wins. He scored 1 win against a pound for pound top 3 fighter and 0 wins against pound for pound number 1 fighters. And Jack Twin Sullivan's opposition fought rate comes in at 7 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 3 from 13. So there is Jack Twin Sullivan. He had 19 fights against champions. That included 2 wins, 11 losses, 6 draws with 0 knockouts. He had 15 fights against Hall of Famers, including 2 wins, 10 losses, 3 draw with 0 knockouts. And Jack Twin Sullivan had 0 world title fights. So on to fighter 249, to an excellent fighter called Speedy Dado. Now Speedy Dado beat 3 world champions. He fought 120 rounds against champions, and he beat 3 Hall of Fame fighters, fighting 104 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. Speedy Dado had 51 fights against rated fighters, and he scored 36 knockouts, 20 knockouts in 3 rounds or less, and 7 knockouts in the first round. Speedy Dado was top 10 rated for a total of 5 years, and he had the longest unbeaten run that ran to 22 fights. Now Speedy Dado was never pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings. He did have 10 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 2 wins. He scored 0 wins against pound for pound top 3 fighters and 0 wins against pound for pound number 1 fighters. So, on to his opposition fought rate. Speedy Dado's opposition fought rate was 7 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 4 from 13. So Speedy Dado had 13 fights against champions, including 3 wins, 8 losses, 2 draws with 0 KOs. He had 12 fights against Hall of Famers, including 3 wins, 8 losses, 1 draw with 0 KOs. And Speedy Dado had 1 title fight that was a defeat. So on to fighter number 248, to a fighter many people say could be really put into the Hall of Fame, even though he was never a champion. It is Tony Chucko. Now Tony Chucko, beat 6 world champions. He fought 136 rounds against champions, and he beat 4 Hall of Fame fighters, fighting 86 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. Now Chucko had 43 fights against rated opponents, and he scored 21 knockouts, 11 knockouts in 3 rounds or less, and 2 knockouts in the first round. Tony Chucko was top 10 rated for 3 years, and he had the longest unbeaten run that ran to 20 fights. Now he himself was pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings for 2 years. He had 15 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 9 wins. He scored 1 win against a pound for pound top 3 fighter and 1 win against a pound for pound number 1 fighter. And Tony Chucko's opposition fought rate comes in at 5 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 3 from 13. So Chucko had 14 fights against champions, including 7 wins, 3 losses, 4 draws with 0 knockouts. He had 9 fights against Hall of Famers, including 4 wins, 3 losses, 2 draws with 0 knockouts. And Tony Chucko had 0 world title fights. So on to fighter 247, to tough contender Ralph Zanelli. Ralph Zanelli beat 3 world champions. He fought 115 rounds against champions, and he beat 1 Hall of Fame fighter, fighting 90 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. Ralph Zanelli had a total of 50 fights against rated opponents, and he scored 33 knockouts in his career, 12 in 3 rounds or less, and 4 in the first round. And Zanelli was top 10 rated for 3 years, with the longest unbeaten run of 32 fights. However, he was never pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings. Now, Ralph Zanelli had 18 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 4 wins. He scored 2 wins against pound for pound top 3 fighters and 2 wins against pound for pound number 1 fighters. And Ralph Zanelli's opposition fought rate comes in at 7 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 4 from 13. So Ralph Zanelli had 14 fights against champions, including 4 wins, 9 losses, 1 draw, with 1 KO. He had 10 fights against Hall of Famers, including 2 wins, 8 losses, no draws, with 0 KOs. And Ralph Zanelli had 1 world title fight that was a defeat. So on to fighter number 246, okay, is Young Corbett II, the former featherweight champion. Now, Young Corbett II is not as praised as the greatest to me of the Young Corbetts. That would be Young Corbett III, the welterweight and middleweight, but he was still a fantastic fighter in his own right. So Young Corbett II beat 3 world champions. He fought 79 rounds against champions, and he beat 2 Hall of Fame fighters individually, fighting 48 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. Now, Young Corbett II, as a pre-rating era fighter, had 0 fights against rated opponents. He scored 48 knockouts, 20 knockouts in 3 rounds or less, and 4 in the first round. And Young Corbett II was top 10 rated for 0 years. Now, he had a longest unbeaten run that ran to 17 fights, and Young Corbett II was pound for pound rated for 3 years. He had 9 fights against pound for pounders overall, scoring 5 wins. He scored 3 wins against pound for pound top 3 fighters and 3 wins against pound for pound number 1 fighters. Cody, what are you doing? What is that noise? There's a little clicking noise, and I've just looked. He's looking a bit sus. What are you up to? Cheeky monkey, I'll come over and tickle you in a minute. So, lost track of where I was. So, Young Corbett II was pound for pound rated for 3 years. He had 9 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 5 wins. 3 wins were scored against pound for pound top 3 fighters and 3 wins against pound for pound number 1 fighters. His opposition fought rate comes in at 4 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 2 from 13. So Young Corbett II had 8 fights against champions, including 4 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw, with 3 KOs. That's what he was doing. He was trying to chew edge at cushion. So, against champions, Young Corbett II had 8 fights, including 4 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw, with 3 KOs. He had 6 fights against Hall of Famers, including 3 wins, 2 losses, 1 draw, with 2 KOs. And Young Corbett II had 5 world title fights, including 4 wins, no loss, 1 draw, with 4 title defences. So, let us go now on to our next fighter. That fighter is 245 Leo Rodak, okay, who was awarded a world title but never successfully defended it. Leo Rodak is a very underrated fighter as well. Very big career, very busy career, fought incredible opposition really compared to many fighters. Leo Rodak beat 5 world champions, okay, he fought 199 rounds against champions, and he beat 2 Hall of Fame fighters, fighting 96 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. Leo Rodak had a total of 60 fights against rated fighters, 60, and he had 6 KOs, 4 in 3 rounds or less, and 0 in the first round. Now, Leo Rodak, okay, was top 10 rated for 5 years, and he had the longest unbeaten run that ran to 22 fights. Now, Leo Rodak himself was pound for pound rated for 1 year. He had 15 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 4 wins. He scored 2 wins against pound for pound top 3 fighters and 1 win against a pound for pound number 1 fighter. And Leo Rodak's opposition fought rate comes in at 6 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 3 from 13. So Leo Rodak had 20 fights against champions, including 8 wins, 8 losses, 4 draw, with 0 KOs. He had 10 fights against Hall of Famers, including 2 wins, 8 losses, no draw, with no KOs. And Leo Rodak had 1 world title fight that was a defeat. So on to our next fighter, fighter 244, okay, to another contender, Al McCoy. He's not to be mixed up with the Al McCoy who was lineal middleweight champion during the decade at 1910s. This is the Al McCoy of the 1930s. Now, Al McCoy beat 6 world champions. He fought 120 rounds against champions, and he beat 2 Hall of Fame fighters, fighting 47 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. Now, Al McCoy had 33 fights against rated opponents, and he scored 47 knockouts, 28 knockouts in 3 rounds or less, and 5 knockouts in the first round. McCoy was top 10 rated for 2 years, and he had a longest unbeaten run that ran to 21 fights. Now, Al McCoy was pound for pound rated for 0 years. He had 13 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 5 wins. He scored 1 win against pound for pound top 3 fighters and 0 wins against pound for pound number 1 fighters. And Al McCoy's opposition fought rate comes in at 6 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 4 from 13. So Al McCoy had 12 fights against champions, including 7 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw with 1 knockout. He had 5 fights against Hall of Famers, including 2 win, 2 loss, 1 draw with 1 knockout. And Al McCoy had 1 world title fight that was a defeat. So on to our next fighter, fighter 243, another of the Black Murderers row. I think I've got 4, including unofficial members who should be in pretty much in the top 100. Others are spread out depending on career. This one is the excellent Bert Littell, a fighter who could just go in a ring and casually dismantle you with precision and beat you down. He was a very good fighter, very capable fighter. Bert Littell beat 3 world champions. He fought 130 rounds against champions, and he beat 3 Hall of Fame fighters, fighting 130 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. Littell had 38 fights against rated opponents, and he scored 24 knockouts, 9 knockouts in 3 rounds or less, and 1 knockout in the first round. Now, Bert Littell was top 10 rated for 5 years. He had a longest unbeaten run that ran to 13 fights, and he was pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings for 2 years. Now, Littell had 11 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 3 wins. He scored 2 wins against pound for pound top 3 fighters and 2 wins against pound for pound number 1 fighters. And Bert Littell's opposition fought rate comes in at 5 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 3 from 13. So 13 fights against champions he had. Okay, he split that into 6 wins, 6 losses, 1 draw with 0 KOs. He has the same record against Hall of Famers. 13 fights, including 6 wins, 6 losses, 1 draw with 0 KOs. And Bert Littell had no world title fights. He didn't even fight for the coloured titles that they brought back in at welterweight, middleweight, etc. in 1940s. So some of them didn't, some of them did. People like Holman Williams Burley, of course, they did fight for those titles, but some did not. So on to fighter number 242, okay, is Puerto Rican Hector Camacho. A fantastic fighter. I used to remember watching him back in the day, in the late 80s into 90s. Fantastic fighter he was, very flamboyant and extroverted. Hector Camacho beat 9 world champions. He fought 165 rounds against champions, and he beat 5 Hall of Fame fighters, fighting 101 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. Camacho had 20 fights against rated opponents, and he scored 38 knockouts, 10 knockouts in 3 rounds or less, and 6 knockouts in the first round. Now, Camacho was top 10 rated for 11 years, and he had a longest unbeaten run that ran to 38 fights. Now, Camacho was pound for pound rated for 3 years, and altogether, okay, he had 9 fights against pound for pound and scoring 5 wins. He scored 1 win against pound for pound top 3 fighters and 1 win against pound for pound number 1 fighters. And Camacho's opposition fought rate comes in at 4 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 3 from 13. So Camacho had 16 fights against champions, including 10 wins, 4 losses, 2 draws with 2 knockouts. He had 9 fights against Hall of Famers, including 6 wins, 3 losses, no draws with 1 knockout. And Camacho had 13 world title fights, including 9 wins, 4 losses, no draws, and 5 title defences. Okay, titled, of course, across multiple weights. So there is Hector Camacho in 242. Our final fighter of this video in 241 is Chuck Chuck Wiggins, okay, who has losing records against champions and Hall of Famers, but this guy mixed in company that most fighters couldn't dream of. Okay, Chuck Wiggins, okay, beat 4 world champions. He fought 226 rounds against champions, and he beat 3 Hall of Fame fighters. Now, Chuck Wiggins fought 311 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. He also had 52 fights against rated fighters. Now, just to give you an idea, that 52 fights against rated fighters is considering that Chuck Wiggins was a pre-rating era fighter into the rating era. So that number is heavily reduced on what it would have been, to give you an idea how many rated fighters he would have had fights against. Chuck Wiggins scored 38 knockouts, 16 knockouts in 3 rounds or less, and 1 in the first round. Now, he was top 10 rated for 0 years, and he had the longest unbeaten run of 11 fights. Chuck Wiggins was pound for pound rated for 0 years, and he had a massive 33 fights against pound for pound fighters, scoring 4 wins. He scored 2 wins against pound for pound top 3 fighters, and 1 win against pound for pound number 1 fighters. And Chuck Wiggins' opposition fought rate comes in at 10 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 4 from 13. Now, Wiggins had 25 fights against champions. That includes 5 wins, 17 losses, 3 draws with 0 KOs. He had 33 fights against Hall of Famers, including 3 wins, 26 losses, 4 draws with 0 KOs. And Chuck Wiggins had 0 world title fights. But he has one of the toughest careers you can find in terms of overall level of opposition, you know, below the elite all-time greats. One of the toughest, aside from the all-time greats. I'm really not joking. This guy fought who's who of everybody in his era, pretty much. So, there's my latest video, 250 down to 241. So we're now officially into the final quarter, the final 25%. More videos will be coming today. I'm the Boxing Librarian, and I'm out for now.